And good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our YouTube channel here, the Township of Douro-Dummer, on the 18th day of November, 2021. Welcome you who are joining us live on the YouTube channel or the recorded version, and we welcome everyone. I'll call the roll of members of council to get underway. First of all, Deputy Mayor Mower. Hi, Carl. Councillor Watt.
Present.
Councillor Landsman.
Present.
And Councillor Watson.
I'm here.
Okay, thank you very much. So we will officially call that meeting to order with all of council present at exactly 3:03. We also have Alana Arthurs, our CAO. Alana, a big wave. Good. Our clerk, Martina Chade-Hartwig, is here. Martina there. And our treasurer, Paul Creamer, is here. He's the one with the new shoes presenting the budget information. And who else do I see? I see various staff members. Jake Condon, a big wave, our manager of public works. Mike Mood, our assistant manager of recreation facilities, is here. Brian Fawcett, our chief building official. Chuck Pedersen, our fire chief. And that's all I can see on the screen right now, and if anyone else needs to be on board, I'm sure they will be. Anyway, this meeting is for one reason and one reason only. It's budget time, and we have a brand new, very efficient process to evaluate our budget. Paul has done a great job along with staff in preparing the details. This is the second meeting we've had. This time around, we talk about the capital budget. The other night, we kicked things off, and it's an opportunity for council to listen. It's the first time we've had a glimpse at this. Staff have put a lot of work into it. And the object of today is to be all ears and see what staff have come up with. In the meantime, members of council are asked to submit their comments by email to Paul and Alana, and or any other staff, and get questions answered. And hopefully they will answer your concerns and your questions, and we will move through the process. There will be a public meeting with everyone invited, and they can also make their comments known about the budget. We try to do everything above board and transparent and as fair and equitable as we can. So we are doing the best we can. So, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to the person who's going to be doing most of the talking. The rest of us are here to listen. Our treasurer, Paul Creamer. Paul, it's all yours with your brand new shoes.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Council, for coming together today to listen to, it's not just my presentation, but it's all of staff's and management's presentation today on the capital budget. I am going to get Martina to throw up the slides up on the screen. So, like I said, we're here today to talk about the 2022 draft capital budget. This is, I don't want to say keyword is draft, but, there's definitely opportunities to refine and to make changes along the way before anything is finalized. But today is an opportunity for council to receive the information. They received it in a report last Thursday, and today it's our opportunity to present it. So we move on to the next slide. There's going to be two kind of sections to this presentation. I'm going to handle the first section, where I'm going to give a high-level overview of the budget and more specifically capital. I did give a pretty detailed overview of the budget and the process and everything on Tuesday. If anyone is listening in and wants more detail on any of the slides that they'll see, or wants more detail on the operating changes, feel free to go back to that recorded version. I'm gonna, for the sake of time, not go into as much detail today, especially on the operating side, and hopefully that works for everyone. So we'll move on to the next slide. So where are we in the process, and what's still to come? So As the mayor mentioned, we kicked things off 2 days ago with a presentation regarding operating. And here we are today, November 18th, and we're presenting capital first draft. The next steps will be, there will be a public meeting on December the 9th. And following that public meeting, there will be further deliberation from council. If all goes to plan, we will adopt the final budget December 21st, but that's if all goes to plan. There are some things that will need to be done between now and December 9th, given that this process is taking place much earlier. In previous years, it's typically February, March, almost April before the budget is completed and passed. So a few things will just be to provide council with an updated user fee schedule and bylaw, and that'll outline all of the user fees and any changes being proposed. Hopefully by then I can have updated reserve balances, at least projected, based on expenditures to date. And we're going to continue to refine the budget based on new information received. For example, just 20 minutes before this presentation, we did receive what OMERS is committing to for their increase, and so that'll impact some of our figures. And so all of those numbers that go into the budget can continue to be refined, and any changes that will be made like that will be outlined, and the impact of those changes will be outlined at the next draft. And part of this presentation is going to be a discussion on a joint public works and fire hall building, and I'll get into actually some of those next steps for that specific process in a later slide. So with that, we can move on to the next slide. So very similar to Tuesday, what are today's objectives? So from a staff perspective, our objective is to provide council with an overview of the draft capital budget. And from council's perspective, it's an opportunity to ask any questions, especially from a clarification perspective, gain a better understanding. And then kind of the last point is, if there are no specific requests, specific motions brought forward from council to make changes to the budget today, the budget that's being presented will be presented to the public at the public meeting as presented today. Now, again, that's not final. It doesn't mean that there won't be opportunities to make changes at the December 9th. It just means that's what the public will see and will be in the presentation given to the public. So we can move on to the next slide. I'm going to give the 10,000-foot story of where this budget is at and kind of what this budget is about. So what we're forecasting is that 2022 returns to normal. There still is going to be risk and uncertainty related to COVID, but this budget does assume that, for the most part, we are returning to normal in 2022. Inflation or COVID has caused steep inflation. When we look at September to September from last year to this year, it was 4.4% for CPI. And another indicator that directly impacts all our construction prices is the non-residential price index, which has gone up over 11%. And this has caused some pressures in certain areas within our budget. On the next slide, I will show that the levy increase is largely due to operating changes. And a point I want to make on that is that the capital and operating do not increase and change in a linear fashion, and neither do the needs of each department year over year. And so last year we were able to keep operating to a 0% increase, and whereas this year capital has a 0% increase. And so when you look at things over time, I would think that there is probably going to be somewhat of a linear fashion over a long range, but year over year, it's not typically going to be equal amounts increasing for each budget. And the last point is, and again, I'm going to go into much more detail on this, that there is a special levy added of 1.18% for financing and funding a joint public works and fire hall building. So we can move on to the next slide. And so the last slide told the story of the budget in words. This slide tells it in numbers. So the column on the right is the amount of that the change of the levy is impacted. So for operating, the dollar change is $272,955, but that results in a 4.73% levy increase. But when we factor in capital, which is more or less zero, when you look at the 2022 levy funded projects and the special levy, and then factoring in the assessment that we received, assessment growth in 2021, we are currently sitting at 4.41%. There is an option here for council to make a donation to the Humane Society as per a delegation that was made from the Peterborough Humane Society for $50,000 back on August 3rd. Councillor Watson, I did receive your question regarding some options around that, and I just haven't had a chance to quite work out those numbers, but I will get those numbers to you in terms of, I'll break down further what those numbers mean, maybe on a spread out basis, or also what that 50,000 would mean per 100,000 of assessment. We move on to the next slide. And so now I'm in the last presentation, I gave a detailed overview of operating, and now I'm going to do the same for capital show some summaries. And this summary is how is everything being funded this year compared to last year. And on the previous slide, we showed the levy impact. And in 2021, it was 1.73 million, whereas this year it's 1.65. So it is going down slightly, and the overall program is going down slightly. But again, capital expenditures are not going to be linear. There's going to be years where there are some pretty significant capital equipment purchases required for public works or for fire, and last year there were some pretty big vehicles and equipment needed to be purchased. One thing I do want to show is the amount being funded through reserves this year. So this year, if we look at the capital project and purchases reserve, I am allocating 275,000 from that reserve. And there's going to be a much deeper dive within the next calendar year into how much we should have in reserves, how much we should be contributing, and getting a much better understanding of our long-term capital needs. But I'm pretty confident in the township's ability to allocate this amount from reserves, given that in 2019, our last completed year-end audit, we did have a surplus of 390,000. So when I look at the amount that we transferred into that reserve at the end of 2019, and how much we are forecasting to take out of it in 2022, I know that we're still coming out ahead, and so I'm comfortable with that amount. The amount of 186,000 from the building department reserve is based on the building department's revenues, and they are having, I would call it record-breaking or significantly higher permit revenues in 2021, given the amount of construction volume, and that's how they are able to fund some of the capital purchases and projects through that reserve in 2022. So we move on to the next slide. And then, so if we look at it from a different perspective, where is the money being spent this year, at least compared to last? And what you'll see here is that kind of story of it not being linear in numbers. So if we look in 2021, fire spent $467,000 in capital, which was largely due to some truck purchases. I can't recall if it was a pumper or what exactly the truck was, but those trucks are not cheap, and so we had $467,000 there. Whereas in 2022, it's a combination of kind of much smaller building improvements, equipment replacements that kind of total that $108,000. If we look on the road side, we are seeing an overall increase in the roads rehabilitation program. We are undergoing a roads needs study, and the results, and Jake can speak to this more coming up, but the results will be presented, it's my understanding, at an upcoming council meeting. And so the program was developed kind of based on previous known needs, but I don't want to steal Jake's thunder. He'll be able to explain much better how he arrived at the program that he's proposing. We can move on to the next slide. Okay, so this project, I'm coming in late in the process. I know this is a project, a joint public works and fire hall building that's been being discussed for a few years. And what we're looking for in this budget is for council to approve the joint public works and fire hall building through the 2022 budget and permit staff to begin the process of finalizing the design and procuring the construction of the facility with the intention of starting construction in 2022 and 2023. So there will be some next steps required in this process, and the recommendation does allude to some of them, but the first one is that the costs that were developed a few years ago, due to aforementioned inflation and just kind of new knowledge that we have about the site of construction and various factors, are being updated by the engineering firm. And we expect to have those costs by the end of the year. And once we have those costs, I can finalize what some of these forecasts from a financial perspective look like. The number that I've used for illustrative purposes does try to capture some increases based on inflation and just general changes to costs over the last few years. So I don't want to say it's too scientific of a number at 7.5 million. The ultimate number will definitely be broken down and explained in much more detail than anything contained in this document. And my hope would be we could have something to bring at the December 9th meeting that may be a little aggressive. Hopefully by the end of the year, the council meeting on the 21st, but we shall see. I'm also working with Infrastructure Ontario to review the township's ability to take on a certain amount of debt and what they will even approve us for. So again, I hope to have that by the end of the year. They won't be approving us firm, but they will be able to look at our financial statements and financial position and give us a good idea that, in generality, yeah, it's something that we would qualify for. They can't give an official approval until we, have the approval from council. It's kind of a chicken or egg thing here. So we need approval from council to actually make the application for debt financing. So once we have that, then they can give us the formal approval. But I have spoken to Infrastructure Ontario already, and they will work on us and just, giving us that high level approval or indication that they will approve the project. Early in the new year, if the project is approved to move forward, we will go through the process of finalizing the design. And definitely during that process, council will be able to provide input and comments and have discussion on that final design. Once the design is complete, we would use those specifications to complete the procurement process. And so that's going to involve, developing the RFP, issuing it, and once it's issued, you have to allow for time for respondents to respond, and then we need to be able to evaluate the responses. In speaking with the engineering firm who is familiar with this process, they estimate that process can take 4 to 6 months. So once a successful proponent is selected, the construction process could begin almost immediately. Now, if everything goes to plan and as per the above timelines, we could be looking at a construction start date in the summer or fall of 2022. Now, it's not unheard of for some of these processes to, go a little slower than the timeline outlined above. And so I would say kind of the latest date for construction would be, let's say, early 2023 once weather permits. We can move on to the next slide. There's a lot more text than I ever like to have on a slide, but I'll just touch on some of the key points here. And so this is a little bit of a different strategy that I think has been brought forward to finance and fund this project in the past. And so I just want to go over some of the inputs of the assumptions into this strategy. So we would be financing the entire amount. So in this example, again, it's an estimate for illustrative purposes, but it is 7.5 million for completion of the project. The term of the debt would be 20 years. And I do want to touch on this principle of generational equity and as it relates to the term being proposed. And there is good practice in debt financing certain projects. And the reason I say that is this ensures that the people who are, or the residents who are getting use and benefit of the asset are the ones paying for it at the time of use. So if we were to save for 20 years for a new building, all those people over the last 20 years who would have been funding or paying for those reserves to be built up in order to fund that building wouldn't necessarily not be getting use of that building. And so there is, I think a good generational equity principle that can be applied to and justifying debt financing a project of this nature. In terms of a rate, the current rate, or at least this was a few weeks ago as I was preparing the report, was 2.67%. Now, I think although construction materials have increased and labor and all those associated costs, this is an input into the ultimate debt payment that is relatively low at the moment. We can never forecast what rates are going to do with science or, know exactly where they're going to be in 6 months or a year or whenever construction gets underway. But this is a pretty competitive and affordable rate for construction debt financing. The loan start date in this example is July 1st, 2022. Why that's important is we would receive the money on that date, but we would be looking at making annual payments. And therefore, our first kind of outlay of payment would not be until June 30th, 2023. So use of reserves. And this is where this strategy differs, I think, a little bit than in the past. So my proposal is to debt finance the entire project. However, what we are going to do is to ease in the levy impact through a special, I'm calling it a special levy. And each year, so the amount that we have to pay for that debt payment will increase each year. And the difference that we need to make up will be paid for through reserves. And so in the bottom table, we look at the actual numbers there. Until we are fully phased in and fully paying for the debt through the levy, we would be proposing to use about $1 million of reserves. I think what this also allows for is, we are going to continue to, and this is the last point there, we're going to continue to seek grant funds. At this point, there's been no commitment from upper levels of government to provide any funding for this project, but anything that comes available, being shovel ready, we're definitely going to apply as staff, and who knows what can come along. And so that could either lower the need for reserves, or it could reduce the amount of years we need to have the special levy. Once we get that grant funding, we could kind of alter the strategy, but until we have a commitment, this would be the strategy in place. I believe that's my last slide. If we move on to the next one. So I just want to pause there before I start handing it off to the managers and see if there's any questions from council.
Okay, anybody at all? Questions for clarity would be appropriate now, or we'll just move on. Very interesting, Paul. I've got to say I'm impressed. Anybody at all? Okay, then, keep going.
I have a question, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, where are you, hiding somewhere in the broom closet?
I'm here.
Okay, there you are. Go ahead.
This is very exciting looking at this. I would like to, though, to keep this schedule going, how soon can we meet with the people that are looking at this joint building to look at perhaps some options? Other municipalities have chosen and have been very successful at housing works trucks outside under a truck port or a carport, except for the limited number of service bays for maintenance on those vehicles. That's an option I'd like to talk to the planners or the engineering people about. I don't need an answer now, but I think it would be appropriate. Some of us have even toured one of those locations, that being the city of Peterborough. And I'd like to look at that, because if we can house those vehicles outside with heaters and so on, it's going to be much cheaper than what we're proposing here.
Well, will there not be an opportunity at some point in the early stages of this to meet with the engineer, the architect, whoever he is, and discuss those things? We need that out of the way before we start.
I would hope so, but there's pretty aggressive schedule here, and I like it. I like the aggressiveness of it.
Alana?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, in initial conversations with Tyler at Greenview, he has indicated that they're going to update the pricing for us based on what was provided. We have looked at it from a staff perspective to see where we might be able to find some cost savings, and he's also indicated that he believes we might be able to find some cost savings. So once we have that amount come forward, we will, and once council, we needed to understand where council was on this, and if essentially this budget moves forward and we have general consensus to move forward on the project, we will definitely bring Tyler in and have a fulsome discussion about the best way.
That's fair.
General discussion, general agreement is okay.
That's fair. Okay.
And I think in generality, we're looking for approval to move forward on this project. The ultimate scope
Yeah.
is what is going to be finalized in that, final design part of the process. And, maybe I can't comment on whether or not the amount proposed is the high end or the low end, but if there's changes, then we will adapt the strategy as required. What I would say is, for 2022, and given this is the 2022 capital budget, we are looking for that commitment to begin this financing strategy. The ultimate kind of how many years, what the 2023 and beyond levy looks like will be impacted by what the final cost is. But the amount being raised in 2022 will and can be used to continue to fund any pre-construction costs, any expenses that we will incur before construction actually begins.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. Go ahead, Heather.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this is my time on council that the previous council had started putting forward. It seems that although I appreciate what the plan is, and I think in concept I don't disagree with the plan, but it feels very hasty. It's one of those things where we've been talking about it for a very long time, and now it's here, and we haven't really had an opportunity, aside from this, from a budget, which kind of feels like an omnibus kind of situation where we're, it's not buried within it. Obviously, we're being very transparent, and the conversation is happening now, but I feel like we haven't had a lot of conversation about this plan other than through this budget process. So my question through you, Mr. Chair, is the why now, right? I understand the case in terms of interest rates, but what is the impetus to move forward with it in this way? All of a sudden, it seems, even though it's been going on for a long time.
Well, I guess the biggest why now that can't be avoided is the health and safety of our employees. These facilities are so far behind the times that I think we have an obligation to finally come through on this, because they're totally inadequate. That's why now, and we got to get it done. Anybody else? Tom?
Yeah, thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, real quickly, it is a tough one. I mean, I'd like to know close to final numbers before I ever give the go-ahead to say, yeah, go ahead, because, we have taxpayers that are scrambling now to try and make ends meet and to get their taxes paid, and some of them are behind. And then we're going to throw a $7 to $10 million building on top of them. And we have discussed this in previous years and stuff like that. And council did lay down the mandate right at the very first that we would be responsible for a third, and the other 2/3 had to come from senior government. So I'm still stuck on that one. I mean, rather than stick it all on the taxpayers' back. I hear the mayor. I do know that, yes, there is health and safety issues, but how do you approve something when you don't even know all the, give the go-ahead when you don't know all the details? That's where I'm kind of stuck at.
Paul, go ahead.
Ultimately, through this budget, we have to come up with a plan. Without the plan, that's step one. And to me, this plan outlines the next steps. And ultimately, I think this budget, what council is committing to is to move on to the next step of finalizing design, and there's going to be costs associated with that. And the special levy, we'll call it, is going to be used to fund any cost associated with finalizing the design. I don't think through this budget that there is 100% commitment to this project, in the sense of if a design can't be decided on, if it can't be agreed upon. But without a plan, we can't move forward as staff. We can't begin to put the steps in motion. And so to me, that's what this is. It's a way to fund it. It's a way to finance it, and it's a way to move forward on this project.
And ultimately, if this council makeup decide they don't want to go ahead with that, that's ultimately what's going to happen. As long as everyone understands what's at stake here, and probably the personal risks you're taking by not moving ahead in some way. So that's a fact of life. So ultimately, it'll take 3 votes. If you want to say no to the project, go ahead. It's up to 3 of you. Okay, move on, Paul. You're muted, Paul.
The next portion of the budget will be each manager presenting and giving an overview of the projects that they are proposing to complete in 2022. So if we bring the presentation back up, I believe we are going to start with corporate services, and Alana is going to take that away.
Thanks, Paul. Just with regards to corporate services, I think I'm going to do the beginning and then I'm going to hand it back over. Essentially, in the service delivery review, there was a recommendation to move forward with the job descriptions, the compensation review, and a pay equity review. So we've completed 2 out of the 3, and we will look to do that pay equity in next year in 2022. The municipal office appliances, currently we don't have a refrigerator in the town hall, so it makes it difficult to have rentals there. And I think there has been some interest in getting back to renting that room, and those that want to come and have meals and that sort of thing. And we're without a refrigerator. So we've also had some challenges with our appliances in here. So we put a little extra in there just to make sure that we can upgrade the appliances as we need to. And then the hardware specifically, when we look at the modernization funding that was provided some time ago, it has not been completely spent. And I know there are situations where grants come up and the first thing they say is, have you spent all the money that we've already given you? And unfortunately, our answer was no. So we've had some conversations about how we utilize that money with the modernization funding. The hardware was something that I think is important. When we experienced COVID, I know here there was some challenges trying to find laptops for everybody and make sure that people could work from home. So there's been a lot of progress, but I think there's an opportunity to upgrade some of that hardware, both in laptops and cell phones. We have gone back and looked at the contract. Unfortunately, most cell phones are not being used to their capacity right now. So we want to upgrade those devices to ensure that they can use them to their full capacity. I believe all of this money has been allocated from that modernization funding that was provided initially.
Correct. All 3 of these projects are being proposed to be funded through the modernization grant. So we move on to the next slide. And I'm just going to talk about, being in charge of IT, I guess. These fall a little bit more under my domain. So the first project, and our strategy on these projects is, we want to modernize. There's a variety of things from, and at the corporate level, from a hardware, like Alana mentioned, desktops or laptops, phones, etc. And then there's a few items on the software side. Some of the costing on this, there's not a ton of companies out there who specialize in this, so we're continuing to kind of refine this estimate. But what this estimate does include is implementation of Office 365. And what that's going to do is there's quite a few tools in there that we can use that will allow us to do a variety of things. So I think one of the first things that I would mention is Microsoft Teams. So we implemented a free version, but it's quite limited in terms of what we can do. Additionally, we haven't had any training on it, so we don't leverage many of the tools for collaboration, for project management, project tracking, task tracking, better communication amongst staff. These are all things that Microsoft Teams can provide. The other big piece of this project will be Sharepoint. And it's really a clerk's project in terms of the Sharepoint aspect, but I'll do my best to speak to it. So essentially, we're going to use Sharepoint for all of the township's records retention. And this is a software that some other municipalities are using. to digitize and automate document disposal. And then, so what this does is it removes the need for a lot of our paper storage. We can use the tools in other municipalities I've been in. We've used Sharepoint for even some accounts payable processes. So electronically approving invoices and then storing that invoice electronically. You know, we have, I don't know how many filing cabinets just of invoices. And if we could remove that going forward, that creates more space. It's more efficient to find all the documents and just environmentally friendly to have less paper. And this also ensures that all staff are up to date and trained on any new features that exist in Word, Excel, Teams, SharePoint. There's tools like OneNote, and that we're being as efficient as possible in our Microsoft Office use. Just a selfish point for the Excel part is, you know, some of the documents that I work on, especially the budget document, you know, it allows for multiple people to be in the document at the same time, to track versions much better. I had a kind of a crisis and I lost a lot of my budget document the other day, lost about a week's worth of work, and our existing Excel doesn't track versions like SharePoint does. So if I had that feature, I would have not lost a week's worth of work. And that kind of leads into the next project, what I'm kind of calling finance modernization. And there's a few components to this project. And the first one is to bring someone in and review kind of all of our processes in detail. So that's accounts payable, accounts receivable, budget, accounting, year-end, payroll. And so we're going to look at the processes in two different ways. And the first is, are we physically and the way that we're actually completing the process efficient? And are we using Great Plains, which is our accounting software and financial system, as efficiently as possible? So about 10 years ago, I believe that's the timeline, it could be even a little bit earlier, is when Great Plains was initially implemented. And along the way, new features come out. You don't always have time to implement them, to take advantage of them and to improve your process because of the new features. And so what this project is going to do is to make sure that we're utilizing Great Plains as efficiently as possible, and all the tools in it that give not only staff but council the information they need in the most efficient way possible. The way I look at the cost is that a new financial system, or to implement a new system to get the latest technology, is hundreds and thousands of dollars, and a much bigger undertaking. This also allows for implementation of a tool called Virtual Town Hall. This allows residents to log in online and access tax statements, tax balances. They manage their own accounts, so any pre-approved payments, information, and then we can expand that to include more fees other than taxes, like potentially building permits and fire permits and dog tags and a variety of payments. The third one would be budget software. So I did create a budget model which simulates software, but there's definitely flaws in the software, in that I can confidently say I'm advanced in Excel, but not everyone is. And if there was someone else in the role, they may have a really difficult time using it. Whereas software will definitely streamline things. It also saves time. Even though I have a good model, there's things such as bringing all the information together. I send out a file and then I have to copy it back in. And it just allows for errors to be made throughout the process. And then the last part of this project is an allocation that, through number one, there could be some recommendations for further improvements. And there is an allocation within this project to make some of those improvements potentially in 2022 or beyond. So that's it for me. That's it for corporate services. Any questions on those projects?
Yes, I have one.
Go ahead, Carl.
Just on, especially number 4, is that in line with the service review recommendations to move forward with these modernization software?
I will look. I want to confidently say yes, but I will look to Alana or even Martina, who's been a little bit more intimately involved in that service delivery review project.
Yep. Ladies?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think there's plenty of areas within that service delivery review where it identifies specifically that we're not using GP to its full effect, as well as other areas that we can upgrade. So I think there's been lots of opportunity in the municipality where things just haven't been upgraded, and definitely the records retention portion is a huge piece that needs to be included. So specifically to what Paul is talking about, I don't know if there's a line item, but definitely throughout the document, there's lots of references to how we can upgrade and what we should be doing to enhance our software.
Martina, do you recall any more detail?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. There was definitely many recommendations regarding software. Office 365 is the most up-to-date version of the Office suite. I can't remember what version we're on, but as Paul said, it has not been the most reliable, and he's lost documents, I've lost documents. And the way our system works right now is anyone can access a document. So I could access one of Paul's, and if I was just trying to look at it, I could corrupt it by accident. So with the new 365 and SharePoint, it creates all of these different user profiles. And so I may be able to access Paul's document to just look at it like you would look at a document in the library, but I wouldn't be able to actually, take that home and work on it. I just am able to look at it. So it would create a lot of safety checkpoints for us, and it would make that file retention a lot easier and the processing of our data much simpler in one big system instead of having it all over.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Heather.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, I certainly have a lot of experience with cloud-based organizations and teams, and I think the move to 365 makes sense for all the reasons that you stated. My one question, however, is around SharePoint with respect to records retention. Do we not already use a software, I believe it's Tomrums internally, for records retention, or are we still doing paper-based?
Go ahead. It won't be me answering.
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Watson, we do use Tomrums, which is a system that helps us create the retention schedule and the retention bylaw, and it provides us guidelines, but our retention is paper-based at the moment, not digitally based. So this would help us move into the digital age instead of having everything in boxes.
Sure. As a follow-up, though, doesn't Tomrins offer an add-on or extension for the digitization of that? And would it not make more sense to use that system that's already, I know there's a significant investment even just setting up the timelines and what have you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we have looked at that, not as in depth, but the SharePoint comes with 365 and we can add the Tomrums software on top of SharePoint. So they're not, it's not one or the other, we can use them together.
But okay, as long as there's integration, that's fine. Thank you. Tom,
go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Another really good option with SharePoint that from previous stuff I got is training modules. Like you can, let's say, own some of your health and safety, that kind of thing. And, you've got to do it every year, or women's training, that kind of thing. And people can go online at their, when they've got time kind of like that, got a few minutes to spare, you can do it from home, whatever, do your training module, it tracks it, it sends a thing to the administrator saying, hey, this person has passed this module for this year. So yeah, it's a really great program.
Okay, anybody else? Keep going, Paul. Alana, go ahead.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, just to add some additional clarity to Councillor Watson's question, with Tom Rims, it really is the basis of the classification system, but any of the records retention systems will incorporate it. So my experience has been with file hold, which was something completely separate from what Sharepoint can offer. And I think for the implementation of that, we were about $35,000 to $40,000. So to get this through Office 365 and be able to use SharePoint in the same capacity that we would be able to use file hold, I think is probably a better approach. But Tom Rims itself is just the classification system. So any of these, the file holds, the SharePoints, Laserfiche, any of those will integrate with that classification system.
Okay, Paul?
Thanks. So if we go back to the slides, we'll move on to the next department. And Martina is going to talk about planning and development.
Thanks, Paul, and through you, Mr. Mayor. So as council knows, we are currently undergoing a county official plan project. It's a comprehensive review. During that official plan project, we are also setting up a schedule to update our zoning bylaw. It has to be updated within 2 years of the official plan being adopted, first by the province and then by our local councils. So we have set aside $40,000 for 2022 in the hopes that the official plan project is completed in mid-2022, if not sooner. And then we can immediately jump in to start the groundwork on the zoning bylaw amendment or overhaul. As everyone knows, our zoning bylaw is quite aged. I believe the last real housekeeping overhaul that we've had was in 2010. There's been lots of regulatory changes since then. Our community has changed in that time as well. And there's a whole new world ahead of us with home-based businesses and people working from home and more multi-generational living requirements. So this is a great time, once our OP is in place, to do a total overhaul in our zoning bylaw to make sure that it's not only going to help us currently, but it's going to help us as we continue to mature as a more digital economy. I'm also just going to touch on the historical committee.
Just a sec, Martina. Carl, you got your hand up, or is that a mistake?
Okay, I don't see it up, but maybe I've...
Your little hand there, okay? Okay, sorry, Martina, go ahead.
Not a problem. So as I was just mentioning, Councillor Landsman had pointed out during our last presentation that we had missed the historical committee. So Paul has worked those numbers back into the budget for us. The historical committee has asked for $10,000 to continue working on the lime kiln project. This is the restoration of the historic lime kiln. It's at right near the intersection of County Road 40 and Webster Road. I don't have much other details on the project and what the actual plan is for 2022. But I was hoping that Councillor Landsman may be able to shed some light on that with her discussions with the committee.
Go ahead, Sheila.
Thank you. As a matter of fact, following this meeting is a meeting of the historical committee, and the plan, I think I mentioned it before at a council meeting, the plan is to come up with exactly what needs to be done to keep the location safe and see where that takes us. And that it was also discussed that, for instance, possibly Public Works or even Parks and Rec could help out if they needed to have some work done, some landscaping done, rather than pay for it to be done out of house. So I have really nothing more than I can add to this at the moment, but there will be more from the meeting tonight, I'm sure.
Okay, thank you. Paul?
To clarify that, what I emphasized at the beginning, that is draft things are going to be refined. And this was an example of that, once I got the first draft report out, Councillor Landsman did point out that this project was an oversight. But luckily, this project is $10,000, and the fire chief pointed out that one of his projects is showing to be funded through the levy, but has in the past been funded through reserves, and that project coincidentally is $10,000. So the net impact to the budget is zero by adding this and correcting the other mistake, and that is a pure coincidence.
Good going, Paul. Heather, again, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. Although I do support the work that's going on at the lime kiln project, I feel a little reluctant to approve it without a plan, and knowing that the committee is working on that plan and we're kind of in that process. But I think, you know, in terms of the overall budget, I'd want to, before we release any funds, see what that approved or what that proposed work plan is for the coming season.
Yeah, and I hope the historical committee will have a little more clarity on that as we move forward. Sheila?
Yes, I will. As I said, I will have a report following tonight.
Yep, good. We'll look forward to that. Thank you. Paul?
Same question, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, you with your hand up again. Good.
Yes, I just wanted to make sure that hopefully we'll have an overall estimate of how many more years and how much more expense.
We do need to put an ending to that, Sheila. I think you agree with that. It seems to have been going on for years and years. Yeah, we need some ending in sight.
It has, yes, it has been going on for quite some time. I think we all knew there was going to be a lot of work to do it, and hopefully we can get a very good design of a plan tonight.
Good.
Thank you.
Look forward to that. Thank you. Go ahead, Paul.
We move on to the next slide, and we'll have Chuck discuss his fire projects.
Thank you, Paul. Through you, Mr. Mayor, we have 8 items to review for capital purchase for 2022. Bunker gear is always one of those things that we don't 100% know. We're going through a recruiting process now. We don't know how big, tall, or small our new recruits will be. We can repurpose and resize some of our gear, but we can't always do that. You can only stretch them so far. So we're anticipating, we're planning on 3 sets. So that's what that first one is for. Our Station 2 project, we are spending the $100,000 on the funding that we got to get the station in order to serve us well into the future. We do have plans that came from Greenview with their review and going through this project and the things that we're doing there and the uncertainty of what the septic system exactly looks like at that building. We are anticipating that we would put a small pumping station in there and put an up-to-date current septic bed. So that's what that is about. Our extrication tools, this is a one combination tool. This is our 4th year of our 4-year project to upgrade all of our extrication tools to try to keep up with the technology of the vehicles that are on the road today, so that we can get them apart when we need to. Next slide, please. Vehicle stabilization kit. That seems to be more as cars are, they're not crumpling in the way that they used to, but they certainly do different things, and the stabilization is an important feature that we need to do. So right now there's basically 1 kit. We can break it into 2 because we always send at least 2 stations to any motor vehicle accident, so they can support each other with half a kit each that joins up to be a full kit without wasting, without doubling the cost, if you will. So we do only have 1 of those kits. We do have 1 other set that's on a vehicle that's going out of service in 2022. And it's as old as the truck, and it is not compatible with our other sets. And the other station doesn't have anything at all. So we're proposing to put 1 kit that splits into 2. So it ultimately becomes 2 half kits that they can work together with that. So that's what that's about. Our fire helmets, this is the 3rd year of a 3-year project. This was something that we started with ergonomics and safety next drain, and it also worked well with our new SCBA that we put into service this year, and meets the requirements of that SCBA pack and the masks that come with that. So that will replace all of our helmets to that modern style helmet. Number 6 is the forestry pump, and that's what Paul mentioned, and this comes out of our burn permit revenues. So this is a wildland fire tool that we need to replace. We have 2 very old pumps. One of them is still working okay, but the other one has been very problematic, and I would consider unreliable to get started. So this would be a replacement of that pump. And again, that would be that $10,000 Paul talked about, and that's comes out of the revenue that we have from our burn permits that go into wildland firefighting equipment. And the last slide, please. Lifting airbags, again, similar to the approach of our stabilization equipment, but we had 1 kit on one station. And again, it has expired and is out of service. So currently we have no lifting airbags. So again, we'd like to put in 1 at every other station. Again, they would be deployed out at one of those vehicles would be deployed out to every vehicle accident, so they could help each other. And elimination of 4 sets, I think we can manage with 2. And the last one is, you see, if you watch any movies or shows, or you've seen trucks around, a lot of them have a monitor on the top of the fire truck. Our department has never had monitors on the top of the fire trucks. They do make ground monitors now that are pretty good. So this is a proposal to have one of those. It allows for a large fire stream if we need to have a large amount of water. It also allows for firefighter safety for areas that we may be trying to cool propane tanks that are potential of explosion. You can leave that monitored, so you don't have to have personnel in potential harm's way. They oscillate and stuff like that on their own. And they do have some safety features that if they get, knocked or kicked or whatever, they can shut off. So that would be the first one that we would be implementing. But I think they've come a long way. We don't have the height in any of our buildings. Well, I guess we do one now, but we could never have that monitor on top of the roof, even the pipe alone itself. So this is a good alternative, provides a bit of safety, and will give us that good water flow. And when we do our tanker shuttle test, we've always had to borrow one to do the flow testing. So this would allow us to do that as well. Not that that's critical, it only happens every few years, but it's good for training purposes in that ground. So that completes my capital request for 2022. It's much significantly less money asking for than last year, but like Paul said, we had a few fire trucks coming in. We do have one carryover project, but that is funded from 2021 is the arrival of our new Station 2 pumper. So we will get it later in 2022, but again, it is a carryover and funded from 2021.
Good for you, Chuck. You guys are doing a great job. Any questions about the fire service presentation? Okay, we'll move ahead then. Paul?
We can move on to the next slide. If you do hear any crying, I swear it's not me. You guys are being kind to me. It is my 4-year-old in the background. So
I thought maybe you were upset about the budget or something.
No.
Okay.
And so we move on to Parks and Recreation, and Mike Mood is going to present.
Hi, through to you, Mr. Mayor. The Parks and Rec Department is proposing 5 capital items this year, 2 at the Darrow Community Center and 3 at the Parks and Rec Department. The first at the Darrow Community Center is we're looking to add an additional $9,000. That's to cover the increases in our change of thought for the flooring type that we were going to put down. I believe we budgeted $10,000 last year to do a traditional tile. But given the nature of some of the rentals in that room, we've with fitness classes and them using weights and rolling around and moving all that stuff, we decided that maybe a rubber tile might be better suited for that floor. Just it'll hold up a lot better over the years. The second is the insulating ductwork at the Darrow Community Center. Currently, the ductwork from the outside unit to the inside upstairs room is not insulated. This was pre-approved in 2019, and it was to be scheduled in 2020 for work completion. And I guess, however, it got missed at that point with our department, and we didn't carry it over to 2021. So we're just trying to catch up on that and go ahead with that work that was pre-approved. Next slide. For the parks, we're looking to replace our Kubota tractor. This is currently a 2005, and it is past its life expectancy. So we're looking to replace that this year. Also, we're looking for $80,000 to help improve the South Park. We're looking to rebuild the canteen that was torn down with washrooms. We're also going to add a tennis court with the ability to transform it into pickleball. We've been having a lot of requests lately of that from residents, and make that ball area more accessible with adding a ramp up the hill and some stairs. This project is dependent on the federal grant that we applied for and awaiting approval. So, and the last project that we have is the back dam boat launch parking. Since some changes of areas of access for the river there, back dam has seen a big increase in parking needs. So after meeting with the roads manager, we've come up with a plan to increase parking so we do not stop the flow of parking for the people accessing the swim area and the playground. So, anybody has any questions?
Before any questions, I'm just going to jump in quickly. I'll correct this in the final, but the Darrow South Park improvements, the total cost would be quite a bit more than the 80,000. I believe it ends up being 400,000. What the 80,000 represents is the levy funded portion for the township. The grant that we applied to would be covering 75 or 80%. But I will I'll include those updated figures in the next draft.
Okay, anybody? Okay, good job, Mike. Good job.
Thanks.
Paul, move along.
So I believe this is second last. We have Jacob to discuss the roads capital budget.
Thanks, Paul. Through you, Mr. Mayor. The roads department has a few pieces of equipment to replace. While I am an advocate for cost savings and not replacing equipment unless it's needed, we do have to be also keep an eye on when these pieces of equipment do come due, that we don't bottleneck ourselves and have, as Paul mentioned earlier, a substantial amount of equipment needing to be replaced in the future years. So the first item is the 1-ton roads truck, which is used for our patching, snow plowing, the parking lots or the garages. Additionally, now we will be snow plowing the transfer station and the municipal lots, as well as sanding and snow plowing the school sidewalk. The next item is the John Deere loader. This item is vital for the Public Works Department. It's used for snow removal, loading various pieces of equipment, heavy items, also supplies the sand and salt to the trucks during the winter months, and as well as loading various aggregates. The next item is a new piece of equipment that is a piece of equipment that will deal with some of the roadside brushing. We currently have a large machine in-house that completes some of the larger stuff. This item would be more for your brush and items, brush and trees, the 3 to 4 inch diameter. Typically, we contract some of this brushing out on a yearly basis. This would help reduce the cost of reduce the contract cost and complete this in-house. The next item is the 3-point Hitch roadside mower, which is attached to our small tractor. This is used for cutting the grass along the road edge. Currently, we have a outdated bush hog mower, which is not very efficient. Replacing this with a newer style will improve the productivity and reduce staff time. Next slide, please. And the last item here is the sidewalk improvements at the Douro 4th Line and Douro Public School. These are additional funds required that were previously approved by council to be carried over to 2022 to be cleared up. I guess I'll maybe ask if there's any questions there, and before we move on to the.
Okay, anybody at all? Heather, go ahead.
Your worship, thank you. Through you. Jake, the brushing unit that you're looking at purchasing, I happened to have the opportunity to see some of the testing that was happening over the summer. Is that the same unit that you were testing over the summer, or is it a different unit?
No, we didn't see good results with that unit. It was, it didn't, it worked fine. It just didn't reduce the limbs to a small mulch. It left it in too big of pieces. We had some residents call afterwards, and it didn't leave what they're used to seeing with our large machine. So this unit would be leave it more like they are used to and what our larger machine currently completes.
Right. Okay. No, and that's exactly what I was getting at, because I heard some of that feedback as well and took a look. So is it about the diameter of the ability for cutting? Like the one that you're looking at is a 3 to 4 inch diameter, was the one that you were testing a smaller diameter of brush that you could cut? And is that why it left the aftermath? Or how do you know that this one is going to work, I guess?
Good question. This one would have a different head on it, or brushing unit head. The one that we tested or had as a demo was more of a knife style, which virtually just cut the brush off and left it lay in the ditch, where this will cut it, but we'll mulch it down to a more manageable size and to help with it to decompose.
Thank you.
Okay, move along. Anybody else? Jake, you want to keep going?
Thank you. So if we can go to, there we go, thank you. So the surface treatment projects proposed for 2022, they're based off the roads department 10-year hardtop projection schedule, which is influenced by the
I think Jake needs to put a sweater on. He's frozen. Paul, do you want to keep going with his talking points until he unfreezes?
Sure. I don't know if I can do it justice. Why don't we move on to
Or your 4-year-old? Is he still screaming? No? Okay.
It just stopped. So
good.
Why don't we move on to building services until we get Jake back?
Go ahead.
So if we move a couple slides. There we go.
So we've got a couple things, and as Paul mentioned on Tuesday, with respect to the building department, the way that it's financed is we operate in a bit of a silo for financing purposes. So the building department is operated off of full cost recovery for building permits, and we don't impact the levy with our operating and capital expenses. So based on the reserves that we had following the end of 2020 plus a very, very high volume 2021, which is continuing on. We have higher than anticipated reserves at this time. And so the thought process is that there's some expansion or acceleration of plans, long-term plans that may have taken place later can happen now. So in addition to it assists the municipality's plans with the addition of the full-time planner and also the addition of the admin staff for the building department. We don't have enough room in the municipal office to accommodate these bodies and seats. So the plan is to take the existing portion of the basement, which is the boardroom and some back office, as well as the kitchenette, and renovate that for a building and planning office that would be directly accessed by customers from the exterior through the existing council chambers doors and security controlled that way. It's already all set up for it. And it's really the best use of the facility without having to add any additional square footage. The budget is higher than anticipated, just in the event that material and labor prices continue to rise. So when we do end up seeing the final report come in, assuming that this gets approved on this basis, then we should see that final number come in, hopefully much lower than what's anticipated there. The second is a boat, motor, and trailer. So currently, the building department does not have a boat. When we need to access to many of the island properties in the township, we either borrow one of the fire department boats, which is really only permissible because I'm also on the fire department. If that was not the case, then we would have to either pay for a taxi or utilize the contractors and the property owners to shuttle us back and forth, which introduces a whole host of liability concerns. So the ideal scenario is that with the volume of lake that we have to access and the volume of properties that we have out there on the water is that we have a boat. So when we're looking at purchasing a boat, there's a large variety of options, especially with Stony Lake being so aptly named. We want a boat that can actually accommodate on that water, and it can get quite rough depending on the day you're out there. And we want to make sure that we're safe and we have the right size boat. So we've spec'd a boat that would suit our needs. And then while we were in discussions, Chuck and I reviewed the option of having this boat set up that the fire department could use it. So it's a multi-purpose boat. The building department will fund the capital purchase, but it'll be optionally available for the fire department to use should they need it. So that's why the increase in the specifications is a little bit higher than what you might be typically seeing for like a contractor style boat, is because it would be suitable for fire department use as well. We can go to the next slide. The next item is a upgrade to our permitting software. So we currently use a custom in-house solution. Obviously having been one of the first in the county, being the first in the county and also being one of the first small municipalities in the province to move online long before COVID, we had to come up with our own solution. There's now a lot of enterprise and off-the-shelf solutions, and the large group of our neighbors have moved to a company called Cloud Permitting, which was formerly Volta. So that product software is readily available. It is an operating expense generally. The only reason you're seeing it here on the capital purchase is that the one-time setup fee, including all the initialization and data transfer, is $5,000. So that's what you're seeing there on that one. And then we're also looking to begin a reserve transfer every year moving forward to begin to fund a second vehicle. So that second vehicle to add to our truck fleet to accommodate our staff. So we'll basically have the plan is to have 2 trucks aged 4 years apart on an 8-year life cycle. So we had purchased the truck we have now in 2020, the second truck in 2024, and then replace the 2020 truck in 2028. So this 11,250 will fund that on a rotating basis.
That's your story and you're sticking to it?
Yep.
Any questions on the building department's potential requests? Any questions at all? Carl, go ahead. You're muted, Carl.
I wonder if we could have a business case for why we should purchase a boat versus taxi. $30,000 could include a fair amount of taxi work out in the lake, and the taxi people know where the rocks are. My pontoon boat is a little bit different, but I wonder if we could have a look at that.
Okay, what do other members of council think about that idea? Go ahead, Sheila.
Thank you. Through you. I can see possibly having a boat. I just, is the whaler the right style? Because they're not always spectacular in rough water. Just a comment.
Okay. I must say I love the sharing idea with the fire department. That's what we need to be doing more of. Heather, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, I agree. The sharing idea does make sense to work between departments and the approach with the boat. Once we purchase that, is next year's request going to be that truck that you're saving for, a higher powered truck to be able to tow that boat, and the trailer and all the extra insurances and carrying costs around that? Because I do hear and understand Deputy Mayor Moher's remarks about wanting to see that business case. The one-time capital purchase has ongoing maintenance and operating costs versus just the ongoing costs of hiring somebody to do that.
Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
Yeah. So just with respect to the reason why we put it on as a capital purchase is that it was investigated as to whether or not it was a reasonable decision to justify. So the acquisition of a boat into the fleet for the building department, our truck can already tow that boat. So the comment regarding buying a larger truck is we have the truck to do that already. So but the boat and the reason why I actually had to Google a whaler boat, it just in respect to Councillor Lansman's comment as well. It's not a whaler. It is the Whaley 500 is a different. It's a brand. It's a specific brand. So it doesn't have to be that specific boat. It's just that is the concept of a boat that would suit the building department needs as well as being multi-purpose to suit the fire department needs. And then in respect to the idea of using the water taxi. The only service available is from Carvest. They're not centrally located to the lake as a whole. And we have used that service as well, and it's not generally reliably available to us. Being the government agency in the area, we don't have priority service for that, and it's not convenient to use on a regular basis, especially with the septic system reinspection program that we're moving out of the islands for next year. We'll need to be on the water virtually daily. So.
Okay.
Well, perhaps if I could just get a copy of some of your existing notes about bringing this forward. You mentioned that you've already done some fairly detailed studies, so root a copy to me, please. Thank you.
Okay, so as with all these items, ample opportunity for council members to ask more questions, send emails to, in this case, to Brian and to Paul. And let's get these answers down. And when we come back to our next go at this, it's those kinds of things that will have to be voted on. Simple as that. Simple as that. Okay, Brian, thank you for that. I didn't see any other hands up over that, but if you do have concerns, please get them down in writing so that everyone can be in a position to make a decision. Paul, go ahead.
I'm hoping we got Jake back on the line. If we did, he can. There he is. I'm just going to suggest, Jake, to turn off your camera and hopefully prevent losing you again. So if we go back a few slides, I believe that's where Jake.
Okay, Jake, we're all ears. Go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. I apologize for that. So I'll just pick up where I left off here and start from the top. So the surface treatment applications are based off our 10-year hard topping projection schedule, which is influenced by the roads needs study and any previous decisions made by council that may have altered the schedule. While this schedule is a living document, staff have prioritized areas of concern, making the necessary annual adjustments. I just want to highlight this again, this new or not so new, but the provincial excess soil regulations pertaining to the removal and placement of fill may have implications on future capital projects. What I mean by this is that depending on how much ditching or removal of fill per section of road, this is where this will affect our costs associated with that. And the 2021 roads needs study is nearing completion, which may influence the direction of any future capital hardtop programs. Council will have the presentation will be coming to the December 7th council meeting, so council will have a chance to review that 2020 road needs study, 2021, sorry. Next slide, please. Again, the proposed gravel applications are based off of our 10-year gravel projection schedule, which is again influenced by the previous roads needs study and any previous council decisions, which did include the application of 3 inches of gravel on a 5-year cycle. So this schedule has been changed to previously changed when this come into effect to accommodate this cycle, to have gravel applied on a 5-year cycle. While this is a living document, again, staff prioritize areas of concern annually, making any adjustments to this schedule or additions to the schedule. Again, with our roads, the gravel projects, we do have some ditching and brushing included in some of these. It's not just the addition of gravel, there is brushing and ditching in some of these areas. So this excess soil regulation does pertain to the gravel projects as well, which depending on the amount of ditching or road work that's required, will that's where we'll see them costs associated with that. Again, like before, the roads needs study is nearing completion, and council will have a chance to review that, as well as have the presentation at the December 7th council meeting. Next slide, please. So this 2022 budget, I have added some additional budget to the road brushing projects. As we're all aware, the roadside vegetation has flourished over the few years due to the weather trends, and as well as the reduction or the restriction now of herbicide applications. We all know that the removal of brush and brushing the ditches is vital for the safety of the traveling public. as well as it provides clearances for large vehicles, large farm machinery, as well with the road maintenance equipment. Some of this stuff is quite wide, and it doesn't take much brush to come in contact with them. The continuous shade that this brush produces causes the shoulders to stay soft longer. It does deteriorate the roads because they never really truly dry out, which leads to some safety concerns. Like I said before, it improves the sight lines for drivers, especially with deer season or hunting season. It allows drivers to see pretty much from fence to fence when it's completed, allowing for wildlife to be sighted before it's too late. It restores the sunlight into the roadway, allowing it to melt some of the snow and the ice buildup. It allows ditches to be melted or start to melt, which allows the drainage to start happening earlier in the spring, as well as it increases the snow storage during the winter months. That's where our snow goes, is into the ditch. If the brush is growing right out to the edge of the road, it tends to narrow the road as the winter goes on. The ultimate goal for the roads department is to complete mechanical roadside brushing on all township maintained roads within the municipality. This is going to be accomplished over some time. It's not going to be accomplished overnight. However, it is a critical component, and we believe that staff and residents and council have seen how this can help improve the roads and the roads safety. And I believe that's it. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Anybody? You're on it. Jake, we appreciate all the work you're doing on the roads, that's for sure. Go ahead, Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you. Jake, I know I've asked this before, so but roads that were grandfathered, and I know we only don't have very many, so they got, but is there, and I know they reflect on the budget, so that's kind of why I'm bringing it up now, but can we maybe in the next few months, whatever, have a look at that policy and maybe put a timeline on it? I know it's pretty open right now, and somebody that had a hard top road goes back to gravel, and they keep asking, when's it going to go back? When's it going to go back? When's it going to go back? It'd be nice to have something in writing that said, we're going to do it within 2 years or 3 years or 5 years, put some kind of a timeline on it. Like I said, I know it's all affects the budget at the end, so I appreciate that.
Okay, Jake, note to self.
Yep, thank you. I know they have been, those roads have been added to the schedule. However, they were added to the schedule and in a spread out fashion. So as that we can keep it within a reasonable budget over the course of the years, but we can definitely get a list of those roads together and try to get some timelines narrowed down.
Anybody else? Any questions over Jake's presentation? Okay, Paul.
Just want to quickly thank all the staff for their input on the capital budget and for presenting their projects. The last slide is really just the recommendation for this meeting. And it's the same recommendation that we had on Tuesday. So the council received the 2022 draft budget report dated November 16th, and it may be redundant since you received it on Tuesday, and the 2022 draft capital budget presented on November 18th, 2021. And last kind of chance, I guess, for any questions of anything that's been presented today or on the process.
Yep. No, good, Paul. Remember, everyone, be in touch with staff. Any questions or concerns so that we can do this properly. Carl, I saw your hand.
I just wondered, when would you like the Humane Society donation decision made?
But at this point, either a motion could be put on the floor today, or that would be up to council, but it may be more suited to be decided. At this point, there would take a motion to include it. And so I would recommend maybe doing that at the December 9th meeting.
Yep, that'd be fair. You okay with that, Carl?
Yes,
All these things will be coming down to a vote. That's just simply how it works. So any questions, comments, suggestions to change things will be 3 votes will win it. Go ahead, Carl.
just one further, perhaps Martina could check on our policy for donating to outside agencies. I believe we might have a policy on file.
We used to, I think we used to years
So
ago.
if that could be rooted out to us, that would be helpful in our decision in December.
Okay, excellent, Carl. Okay, could I get a motion then for that recommendation as we move through this very efficient process? I must say it's the best I've experienced. Carl, seconder, please.
Thanks very much, everyone.
A seconder to the motion. Tom? All in favor? That motion is approved. Okay, thank you, Paul. Thank you, staff, for making this so clear for us. And I'm sure council will have a lot of input between now and our next get-together. So that will be it. We'll be meeting again on this subject on the 9th of December. I believe it's the 9th. Is that right, Paul?
Correct.
Yep.
The public portion of the meeting will begin at 6 p.m. with the public portion.
And it'd be great to hear public comments on things before we do make any final decisions. Okay, a motion please to adjourn. Martina, you can't make motions. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Sorry, Your Worship. Could we just have the confirming bylaw first?
Sorry, confirming bylaw. Heather, did I see your hand? Heather and Carl, all in favor? And a motion to adjourn. Sheila? Tom? All in favor? Done. Thank you all very much. Thanks to everyone for listening or watching on YouTube. We'll keep the process going, and we're all trying to do what we do for the right reason. So thank you all very much, and good night, everyone.